wants us to wait until the harbor master perhaps move to the new location takes place before we do any landscaping there. I don't know whether that's the stance now with Victor as our city manager, but that is what it was in previous years.
Well, maybe Denny.
Danny McDermott, Parks and Rec Director. Yeah, that's coming here new. That's the same understanding I have, is we really didn't want to do anything until we knew where we were going with the existing plan. And I think we're gonna ask those questions because we feel like we need to have a plan, which we don't have. We're kind of being held hostage by that. So our plan was to be at the Harbor Council meeting to bring that up, like what is the plan? Is this still our plan? What are some possible funding sources? And then after that meeting, then take it to council and say, where are we headed? And if we have to reboot, and it's come up with a different plan, a different strategy, then it would take all of us together to work on what would be a better plan. We could definitely do better than what we have.
So, well, obviously. Now, so you are taking it to council to try to get some direction?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Yes,
so.
And I will be bringing it up as well. We've been on hold. The last time this was discussed by the Harbor Commission was when they recommended turning down the grant. And nothing has been discussed since then. We need to move it forward in one way, shape, or form.
Well,
we need a plan, a timetable, an area, so that the rest of the city can move forward.
Well, I think we're all in agreement probably here on the board, but we have to wait for city council to give approval. So this will be something on our agenda.
Yep.
And I think it should be a top priority.
I agree.
Yes.
If council gives its graces to it.
Well, we have to do something.
We have to do something.
John, this won't be discussed at the meeting on Monday, then you'll go to the harbor,
It's
or
not
somebody will
on
go to the
the,
harbor commission first?
it is not on the agenda for the council meeting on Monday, but I plan to bring it up. And I'm hoping it will be on the next Harbor Commission.
It will be on the next
Okay.
commission.
Sandy, I think they'd appreciate hearing from you too.
Which one? Which meeting?
The council meeting on Monday night at 7,
Okay.
if you can make it.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that concern to everyone. It has been on our radar and it's nice to, maybe you're the push to get us.
Thank you.
Go.
You're the face going forward on the project, Sandy.
Thank you. Under old business, the pending tree donation, do we have a report on that?
Well, the report is right here is the places to consider. I do know there was an email that was submitted by the pastor who indicated these 4 trees on the very bottom where he did not wish for them to be planted there.
The rationale behind that, and it's not just the parish, this came up at the last parish council meeting where the members of the commission were concerned about blocking the view of the church. And I mean, if the church had its way, they'd rather not have the trees there because it will block the view from the inside. But given that it's the right thing to do for the city, I talked to the pastor and they took a look at it and they said, not only for the parish, but for the city. I mean, it's a pretty iconic building as you come down Main Street. What they're asking is don't block that view, so don't plant those particular 4 trees.
I would maybe even go a step further. I did a driving recon trip this morning, and driving down Main Street past the church, I just think it would be wrong to block it. I mean, like I would wonder if we would even take more of those trees out.
Well, that's more
It is
the
an iconic
city and
building
the
and-
tree board from the parish's perspective this morning, and asked me just to make sure that the parish was represented. Those are the 4 trees of concern. So beyond that, the tree board or the city recommends to council from the tree board.
That's exactly right.
Well, is the donation a certainty right now?
It is.
Okay,
In fact, whatever the tree board decides today, that'll go to council on Monday.
okay. And how much money are we talking about here?
I'm not privy to any numbers. I'm understanding anywhere from 15 to 25 trees.
Okay.
Sorry, when I talked to Ron Fennick this week, he said he'd be willing to donate up to $14,000 to cover 25 trees to plant in the 32 spaces that we identified.
Okay.
We've got a plant material cost of about $7,000 in shipping costs. There's probably an equal amount in labor to get them in the ground. And since we can't do this with volunteers, it's actually less than, we're looking at 2.5 to 3 inch diameter, or caliber plant material instead of 2 to 2.5. His concerns were, he didn't want to step on the toes of the church or anything like that, but there's a lot of space on both sides of the road where we could put 25 trees. And some of that can spill over around the corner to Traverse Street if it needed to. But it sounded like the donation to the city was not contingent on blocking that view, and we would feel better if we didn't ruffle any feathers.
Okay. Decided on the species of trees, is that correct?
Originally, we talked about, he wanted autumn blazes, but that falls into the group that is already overrepresented in our inventory and also is very similar in characteristic to some of the Norway maples that we've already been dealing with. We suggested Princeton elms, which Princeton elms would replace what probably was there 60 years ago. And it would be Dutch elm disease resistant, but the thought was that something else like swamp white oak, which is Quercus bicolor, would work well because it's not represented in our inventory currently. It should grow here. There are private instances where we know that it does do well. It's not susceptible to oak wilt the same way that red oaks would be. So we would have a very small monoculture on that area of the street, but it would be in the tree inventory would be a very small percentage. So currently we're looking at the swamp white oak.
Now, on the south side of the street, there are utility lines. Would that interfere with sizes of trees that?
Yes and no. Swamp white oaks are gonna grow slower than the other species listed. And we have a usable lifespan for most of the plants that we put in those small areas. It is less likely that plant will interfere with the power lines than an autumn blaze would in the same amount of time. Anything that we plant that's going to be a shade tree to grow along that area is going to eventually reach that height. And there's always kind of that balancing act of what can we grow that will grow branches high enough that it won't interfere with traffic, but yet stay small enough that it won't grow into the utilities. So I guess the long answer is yes, it will probably get into the utilities, but not at a rate at which we're concerned with like we would be with some of the other species. And I believe one of the concerns with this donation is that it was to produce kind of a homogeneous look along the road so that we have similar species in a small area that gives us a group, a blocking.
I have a couple of comments. Do you think we need to be concerned about acorns on the sidewalk? My oak trees have been very prolific the last few years. Look like they are again this year. Or there's enough squirrels, they'll carry them away, or.
Well, we certainly have enough small rodents to deal with things like eating acorns. I mean, any dicot, any flowering plant will produce fruit. And I mean, that isn't inconsistent with any of the other things that we have. I mean, everything that's listed on the proposed trees to plant has a fruit that has a size that's, equal, similar, some are smaller. And they all have different characteristics.
I like that as a tree, like in a park area,
Right?
where they can just fall on the ground and, I don't know. Somebody wouldn't, anybody to turn their ankle or slip or maybe it's not that big a deal.
If if we're gonna start managing for how plants fruit in the city, then we have other concerns that we need to deal with. I mean, we already have a large number of crab apples which produce round fruit that can be different hardnesses.
I agree.
We
I'm
have,
thinking just some alternatives though, like,
Can I interject?
yes,
So, yeah, speaking on behalf of the DPW, yeah, they would be very concerned. I don't know when oak trees produce acorns, but I know this year they're
Right now.
producing a lot of them.
well,
So-
we're also planning, I mean, we're talking in broad brushstrokes. We're talking about Orchis rubra, which is the common species. It's native to the area. It's also, you're talking about sexually mature trees. So most trees aren't gonna be sexually mature until they're like 25 or 30. Trees that are grown from nursery stock are usually gonna be much younger. If they're grafted trees, then they may be older from scions that are grafted on the rootstocks.
I'm just wondering if we could consider, let's say, a little leaf linden or honey locust. I know those are kind of more ordinary trees, but,
We have already started to tell people that we have things that are too heavy in the inventory, and like our three biggest trees are gonna be lindens, maples that are soft maples, and thornless honey locust. I mean, we are moving towards a monoculture, or a triculture, I guess.
I'm good with elms, but, I don't know about oaks.
I have a question. When you're talking about the tree that you're planning to put there, how long do you think it would be before those trees would interfere with the power lines?
We have to qualify what we're gonna call interference. So if we have what's called secondary power, which is jacketed lines, never. I mean, unless the tree fails, it can have direct contact without grounding out. If we have what's called electricity, which is the bare lines that are usually 35 feet up, it could be as long as 60 years, it could be as short as 10. Trees grow to what is called limiting factors. So if everything's perfect, they grow quickly. If everything is not perfect, then they will grow only as fast as the limiting factor will allow. So if you have a tree that is really sensitive to water and it doesn't get enough water, it will only grow as fast as the water that's available will let it grow, even if you have plenty of fertilizer.
Okay.
Or, whatever, sunlight, it is hard to say how long that will be.
So these are
What are
overhead
the
lines,
power
right?
lines that are on the south side of the road? What street, what type of power lines are they?
I would have to talk to the guys in the power department to find out, what exactly we're dealing with. But so if we're talking 35 feet, probably we would have, that 15-year window would be fine.
Excuse me, what did you say?
If we're talking about 35 feet, that 15-year window would be fine, and that's the area that we're trying to get our trees to survive for. If we plant a tree that lasts for 15 years in a restricted area like that, then we're usually happy. We've gotten our time and energy out of it.
Wouldn't it be smarter, I mean, this is just my humble opinion, but wouldn't it be smarter to put a tree that didn't grow to that height there so that it wouldn't have to be replaced in 15 years or so? Because otherwise, to me, it's kind of a waste of money.
If we plant a crabapple there, we can have disease issues, and it's gonna be wider and shorter, which means that it will end up interfering with traffic, and we still will probably have, that lifespan.
What about a dogwood or something like that?
Well, same problem. If it stays short, it still has to have enough effective leaf area to be able to photosynthesize and create new tissues. And so if it doesn't grow up, it may grow out.
Or what about some of the smaller shade trees, like the red maple? I know everybody said there's a water issue at Soaring Park. Maybe that'd be the perfect tree to put there.
Well, I mean,
Or Japanese, well, that's bigger too. Or like, how about a red horse chestnut? That'd be beautiful. They're flowering. And one more comment that I had
but
too
round
is,
fruit, and
okay,
it would be a
I
bigger
know.
round fruit.
Yeah,
than
you're
we
kind
just
of
talked
gonna-
about.
catch-22. One more comment I had too is, you can't really tell from this drawing, but it looks like those trees and this are very close together. And I think we talked a couple times about spacing them up. Like I drive by the middle school, State Road going north from Lake. Those trees are so close together. It just doesn't look good. And then I think we're going to be taking every other one out in 5 years. So I would just, maybe we need to pay attention to what, we were talking about a guideline of, what did we say, 25 to 30 feet or something?
Yeah, you've got almost 300 feet from where the dots start to the other end. I mean, so, like, you've got that spacing.
Well, I'll go pace it out. It looks,
Well,
I don't know, it's hard, like,
I think the point is, we could go around the corner on Traverse Street. There's a whole section there on the east side that has no trees at all.
Mhm.
And so if we have an overflow of trees in terms of spacing, that would be an answer to that issue.
We can put any stipulations we want on this. I think that, we're looking at, there are some things that this benefactor would like to see. And I think that the design intent that he has is that he would like to see tree-lined street with a uniform shape and form. I would be cautious about putting too many stipulations on it, because he may just say, well, okay, thanks, but no thanks.
I don't think we want, I'm just looking, like, how wide do you think that sidewalk is that goes down to the fountain? 10 feet maybe? So if we use that as a rule, these trees are like 20 foot on center,
Well,
which is very close. And just in my experience, if you have a document that has red dots on it, that's where those trees are gonna go.
well, I think the placement of the trees can be dealt with later, and again, the surplus can be put
Okay,
Again.
if you think that's what'll happen, it's just,
down. I think that's something that should be discussed or paced
I just
off.
hate to have us going in
Later.
and Mr. Fennick thinks this is exactly where every tree is gonna go, and then that's not where they go.
Susan, do you have any comments?
Well, I was just gonna say, my understanding is that Ben and Mr. Fennick have been talking about this for a while, and they've worked through a lot of these issues and come to some good conclusions, and I'm, I guess, happy with what I've seen on paper from them and heard about the species choice and the location, and I trust that if the two of them are working together, that the location of the trees will be right. And I think Mr. Fennick was pretty specific about wanting these to be shade trees, and I think that it's appropriate for us to honor that. So I think it's looking good on paper the way I've seen it, and I hope that we can go ahead with this, because it's been quite a while now that we've been telling Mr. Fennick we'll figure this out and get it done. I think it's time to get it done.
Okay.
May I add something, Mark?
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, I don't think that, changing the spacing is gonna affect how Mr. Fennick feels about this. I think that if we space them out to 30 feet or whatever, a number we wanna look at, that's fine. I mean, he was concerned with whether or not they'll be taken care of. We can propose another species and see if it's available or whether or not that fits the intent or the feeling that he's looking to donate to the city. As far as the arborist for the city of Harbor Springs, I don't see this as being a downside. I would rather not place lindens in this situation. We've already got a lot of them on Lake Street. I think that we can come up with all sorts of stipulations, and like I said, I would be hesitant to put too many on them, other than saying maybe we space this out a little bit more. And if we're gonna qualify, why there's a problem with the selection that he has, and then we need to be, we need to follow that, it needs to be uniform. That's just how I like this tree, or I don't like this tree.
I personally don't have an issue with the oaks at all. And I know that, as Sue said, this has been on the agenda, and I'd like to move forward on it. Is there a motion that we make a recommendation to City Council about this gift.
I'm just concerned that Andy's raised the concern that DPW is gonna have a problem with, and it doesn't seem right for the tree board to go forward with something if it's gonna cause a problem for the city.
I'm gonna send Lucas a text right now.
Ben, is that not something that you've been working with Lucas on?
I have talked to Lucas thus far on getting water to the trees. We have not identified what the power lines are, and that would be the electrical department.
I mean, I grew up in a city where there wasn't, and, again, don't see that as, I'd be interested to know what DPW, what issue they would have with, acorns.
Well, again, we don't have any history of white oaks or swamp oaks fruiting in the city of Harbor Springs. We just don't have that data. You know, we're extrapolating a different species requirement and criteria to this species. It's not that they won't, they probably will.
Well, I wonder if when the city mows, they could like load the sidewalk off if it does become a problem. It's a problem up in our neighborhood right now. John will testify to that.
Well,
Sidewalks
it's
are
an
a mess.
inconvenience. I don't know, the tree's fruit is.
And we've been pushing diversity, and these are two species that, again, we don't have a lot of in the city.
Yeah, so did I hear Ben say that we don't have any white oaks in the city yet?
There is a bur oak, which is a cousin to a white oak on, actually, close to your house, Sue, but it's on private property, and it's the only one I'm aware of. So everything else seems to be red oaks in the city inventory, which is highly susceptible to oak wilt if we ever hit it inside the city limits.
White oaks are less so susceptible.
So, yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. Oak wilt is a disease that is similar to Dutch elm disease that moves through the vascular tissue of the trees. And as it moves, it plugs up the circulatory tissue and the trees die. Red oaks die amazingly fast, like sometimes as quickly as 2 months, which is hugely fast for a plant disease. They exploit the large holes in the circulatory tissue, or in the wood called vessel. And red oaks have much larger vessels so that they can spread through the tree faster than the tree can protect itself. White oaks can be infected with it and either show no symptoms or will have a branch or two die. So they can live with it chronically for decades. And the other advantage is that they're not as likely to root graft together as, so white oaks will graft to white oaks, but they're not as likely to graft to reds. So what we may end up with if we have a lot of reds close together is that one tree gets sick, the tree next to it dies, and the tree next to it dies, and it moves through the forest underground, which is what we saw with elm trees. So we'd have a resistant species that doesn't have an affinity to the susceptible species. And it would be one of the better choices. I mean, bur oaks are kind of in the middle. They can die from it, but they don't die as quickly as reds do, and they're fast growing.
I love the tree, and if we could get a green light on, from the city, that it's not gonna become a maintenance problem, then
Well,
I'd be for it if we could stipulate.
I sort of
spacing.
agree with John. It's really a nuisance. I think the seed from a Norway maple is a nuisance. I mean, when you talk about the next spring and you've got, I don't know how many thousands of young seeds sprouting, it's just the nature of trees that fruit. And I personally don't see it as just a temporary nuisance issue. And for the rest of the year, I think it's a great benefit.
As a suggestion, would it be possible for the tree board to, make a recommendation to council with stipulations to say, yes, on this number of trees in this area with, spacing in between these things, and then let's check and see how we can get this around power lines without creating an issue with infrastructure. I mean, which is the dance we do all the time, but we're just doing this on a large scale this time.
Yeah, we can recommend anything to city council. So,
I'd be in favor of a motion if we could stipulate the spacing.
Stipulate on the what?
Spacing?
Spacing, okay?
Yep.
Can I just clarify that the recommendation will include leaving out the 4 trees as requested?
yeah, well, that's my impression.
I would point out that in my conversations with Mr. Fennick too, that, you know, in uniformity, he has also said that maybe there are more trees in front of the Catholic Church that he would feel are better to come out too. I mean, so, yes, the gift is not contingent from Mr. Fennick on those 4 trees, and he would prefer that those 4 trees do not go in if it's gonna bother the church or city residents.
Thank you.
John, do you have a feeling that they would like more of the trees out or just those 4?
If the half jokingly they said it, if the trees don't get put up, they prefer that. But it's what they're used to, and there's a beautiful open view. At a minimum, they ask that those trees not be planted.
Well, I think it's a great compromise.
I do too.
And I think this is hopefully when these situations occur, if we can compromise as we have, we've reached out to them, they proposed, and they're comfortable. I think it's a goal. for both
And again,
parties.
outside of those 4, whatever the tree board feels is appropriate. And Mr. Fennick, I mean, again, it's an extremely generous offer. We should kind of work with him and defer to him what his preference is.
Sue, do you have any final comments before we make a motion?
No, I don't. I think we're in a good place.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Yes, go ahead.
Let's make a motion then that we approve Mr. Fennick's plan, including the removal of the 4 trees in front of the church on Main Street on the north side, and that the spacing of the rest of the trees will be 30 foot on center, and the species approved as described.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's have a vote. Cece?
Or,
A
excuse
vote on.
A roll call?
a roll call.
I can do it.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Andy.
All right, Ms. Stewart, roll call, what say you?
Yeah,
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mark,
See, yes,
and Ms. Mulder,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
okay, very good.
Okay.
Again, a heck of a gift, and Ben, thanks for the effort you've been putting with Mr. Fennick and,
Oh, you're welcome, but I mean, this is all Mr. Fennick. I mean, he's been tenacious about making sure that this gets done.
well, it's,
Can we send a note to him from
yeah, I
the
think,
city and
we
the tree
certainly
board?
will.
I can send him a text.
Well, that, and I think once they're planted, a newspaper article certainly
Oh,
would be,
absolutely.
would be, I mean, who knows what it might attract, other gifts, so.
So
I think we'll publicize this very well.
I think the tree board decided that a council resolution or declaration, I think a declaration will be done
I
for this
agree.
case. I think that's what you guys talked about
Like right
earlier.
now or after planting, do you think?
It would be after.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the species selection on M119 and Grove Street. Tim, do you have anything to add to your presentation from last meeting?
Yeah, so, just me, Mr. McBride, can you all hear me okay?
Barely, just, you can speak a little louder maybe? I'll turn it up, see if that helps.
I can hear you just fine for what it's worth.
That's all we got there.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Okay. At the last meeting, we presented a plan, landscape plan for the corner of Lowell and Main Street, and we talked a little bit about, species selection. You know, obviously trying to get, species in there that will have some longevity and durability. In between then and now, we've had a prospective donor come forward, Mr. Tripp. We had the suggestion to incorporate some evergreen trees in that landscape, which we did not have. And he's interested in making a donation, which is, you know, obviously pretty significant and worth considering. So,
Can I interrupt you for a
we
second, Tim?
generated another option of a plan that sort of plays off the previous plan, but that incorporates
Again, I'll sit right here.
evergreens as a prominent central
Or you can
element.
sit right up here, buddy.
And
You should just,
so I provided Victor and Andy with a set of,
Oh,
set of PDF
Gotcha.
drawings. I don't know if we have those available to look at, but, the first 3 slides are basically the plan that we looked at last week. And the second set of 3 slides, so, or images 4, 5, and 6 would be, the plan after we've added some evergreens to it. And, I apologize, I can't see what you have on the screen right now, but the last 2 images in that set of PDFs. So, probably what communicates best to us about the plan in terms of being able to understand, it shows us ground view perspectives from, coming eastbound and westbound on Main Street. So if you're able to look at those slides, you can see the impacts that those evergreens have. They, coming from the west, they would completely screen the view into, the football complex and all the vertical elements that we talked about screening in the previous discussion. It also allowed us to loosen the plan up a little bit and diverge from the more formal spacing of trees on regular intervals. So we took the approach in this plan of trying to create a more naturalistic landscape, centered on the evergreens, and then complemented with the regular spacings of what I would call probably large ornamental trees. And the plan was actually a multi-stem birch, whether we can get a white spire or a river birch. Now, understanding there are some challenges to establishing and maintaining those species, particularly in this location, but that was kind of the form I was looking for. So I had sent Ben an email earlier this week proposing a number of species, and I think we're kind of still trying to hash out what those what those large ornamental trees would be, but it sounds like the evergreen we can probably cover it with a straight green spruce and be assured of of some level of durability and longevity. So I guess the 2 things we wanted to get your thoughts on were, number 1, the new, most latest landscape plan. Your thoughts or preferences on it as opposed to, a more formal plan that we presented previously. And the other issue was just a discussion on what species those, large ornamental trees could be.
Okay, Ben, I think you had a comment.
The person making the donation to the city would like to remain anonymous publicly.
Okay.
So I would ask that we keep his name out of the discussion.
Okay. Very good.
That was my own comment.
Okay. Anybody comments on the tree board?
I don't care as much for the evergreens in there. I think if we go back to that design number 1 slide, Andy, if you can.
Yep.
I just think in this case, maybe simpler is better. We're getting kind of a whole lot going on, and I just think that this is pretty. I'm just not sure that that's the spot for evergreens, and somebody's going to say, oh, it's going to block some views, and I think this is simpler, cleaner. I like it.
Cece?
I disagree, I like it with the evergreens.
Okay,
And it may not be up to us anyway.
okay, Susan?
Yeah, I think because as a tree board, what we have been trying to push is the diversity of species. I love to see the evergreens there, and it of course is always a concern that they're in somebody's view, but just eyeballing it from here and trying to figure out whose view this is in, I think it interferes like with where John Leo currently lives, being able to see the front door of the city hall, which probably isn't a bad thing. It's blocking the view of what becomes the question. And I think in this case, because the area to the east of those plantings is the city property, Ravine Park, or whatever we call that there. It's actually a good place to have evergreens because they're not between any homeowner and the bay. And so this is a great place to be able to put a few of those into the mix with the city forest and get away with it, not screw up somebody's view.
I sort of like the design with the evergreens and whatnot. I think it really blocks, as you're coming out of town, that sort of open space. And if the dog park goes in there, it sort of will block that up as well.
Yeah.
Now, I've been thinking a lot about the species of trees, and I'm not real wild about large ornamental trees. The river birch really needs a lot of moist soil, I believe.
Ish.
I was thinking, the one I was thinking about was that, the Fort McNair, chestnut. We've planted a couple of those in town. They seem to be doing very well. You get the flowering in the spring, the yellow leaves in the fall. That would be a suggestion that, I would have.
The other thought is we have the crab apples up the hill, you know, if we did wanna, but maybe again, if people aren't liking something quite so organized, maybe we don't wanna have all crabs, but that would be my taste in it.
Again, we're looking for diversity.
Yep,
We do have a lot of crab apples.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of,
no, I'm not
Maybe our
against
trees.
diversity at all, it may sound that way, but it just seems
Yeah.
like where you have an important, design gesture in town, maybe that's not the place where you have to like go crazy, but it's like everybody else likes it.
I would share that, you know, the conversation that Tim and I had was about river birch and what requirements it would have to actually do well on the site. River birch will survive flooded areas, but we see them actually do much better in Emmett County if they're not irrigated.
no.
They pretty consistently suffer from a nutrient deficiency, which is a lack of nickel. And that's usually because we have sandy soils with not a lot of cation exchange. There's not a lot of ability for our soils to hold a lot of nutrients. And one of the things that happens is the water that we use to irrigate is basic. And so the materials that are in the water, like calcium and magnesium, would tie up the sites where nickel would be. So they do just fine in dry conditions. I hate to say that I would like a river birch better than a white spire, but the river birch are usually pretty free of insect issues that are fatal. So, I mean, that was the discussion, and Tim did share a list of plants, which actually, a lot of those are listed on the tree suggestions that Dana came up with too. So there may be some overlap there if that's an issue.
Tim, when you say green spruce, do you mean, white spruce or?
Picea glauca.
Oh, yep,
So, yeah,
Sorry about that, yeah.
and that can be, I mean, several different flavors. White spruce, it can have a greenish cast. It can also be.
I just want to make sure it wasn't blue spruce.
Yeah, blue spruce was actually mentioned by the donor. I believe it was because it was the plant that they were familiar with. So I'd also point out that the view that may be affected in this instance may be from the Irish front porch. So, but the planting spruce, especially white spruce, which are going to be one of the slower growing spruce, we would be less likely to block a view, and we're blocking the view with a cone or the point of a triangle as opposed to, you know, a cotton candy or something like that. So it may not be as much of a view inclusion as we think.
Here's just a thought, if we do go forward with this, is, you know, I like that white spruce is native to northern Michigan and birch is native to northern Michigan, and maybe we could kind of go down that road if we're to think about some grasses and wildflowers.
Yeah, and this is, I'm gonna jump in again, this is Tim again. That was, I guess the philosophy is more so behind this design. So, you know, trying to replicate something that's, you know, an idealized version of nature. We never see trees pop up on 40-foot centers in nature, but we do see them, you know, kind of come up in massing. So massing of, or groups of evergreens, groups of birds, and I think, you know, playing off the native theme could really, you know, enhance the design.
So Ben, you really think the river birch would be a good selection there?
If I were gonna choose between the river birch and the white spire birch, I would choose the river birch. The issues that we would have to manage in a river birch would be
Letter.
less ominous than the ones we have to do. So the reason the river birch have been used in landscapes is because they usually don't get bronze birch borer, which is a native insect. White spires seem to be at the top of their preferred food. So, and they're not a native species. They actually have very little resistance. The native paper birch, Betula pepifera, would be reasonably resistant if it's in good condition. So as long as it's being maintained, they usually don't have a lot of problems, but transplant, we want to try to protect against that. There is the Renaissance paper birch, which is a cultivar of the white paper, and that would be, it looks like a paper birch that everyone's familiar with. It would be more resistant to borers. But we would still have that possibility if it were severely dried, or like if we had drought conditions for an extended period of time, or if there was soil changes or something like that, then we would want to be proactive in treating that. But we also have very few birch in the inventory of the city. I think we'll have maintenance issues either way.
Well, I like Dana's idea that they're both native trees. And I would be happy with the choice of those.
We almost could make this sort of an interpretive area, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would-
It would be sort of a destination, you know, learn about our species in this area. And then if we can continue that thought to the small canopy trees, I'm crazy about catalpas right now. Are those local or?
So both the river birch and the catalpa are native to southern, to like Ohio and south. So,
What about swamp? We could even do swamp white oak.
well, the catalpas that I've had experience with have had issues, especially if it's cold. I know north of town, they seem to die to the snow line every year. So like I had a catalpa shrub that was on the side of our nursery for years and years and years, and we finally tore it out. It got to be about 15 feet every year, then it would die
So we should not put something in. It's going to be experimental, I guess.
They do survive in Traverse City, Boyne City, so there are a few around, but not large.
Or how about sugar maples? That's, like a signature tree up here, or even a red oak.
Both would survive the conditions. Sugar maple would prefer a little bit wetter condition, I think. The red oaks actually will tolerate fairly dry, dusty conditions.
Might be nice to have that fall color coming into town, like big pop down the hill.
Yeah. Tim, do we have an elevation for how far the ground level is to the, let's say, parallel to Bluff Street? Like, do we know how much distance we're trying to,
Yeah, and we would be planting, I guess well below the road elevation.
Okay.
Where those small canopy trees are shown now, we're about, I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 6 to almost 8 feet below the curb edge.
Okay.
So, what that means is we're going to be truckers looking out, or no, we're going to be looking at, maybe a tree canopy, at least for the first few years.
I guess what I was asking is, do we know, are we concerned with views for people that are on East Bluff, where they have a view of the bay, or are we concerned with the views that are going to be people on Main Street that are looking at, like, buildings currently?
The houses on East Bluff are not gonna be affected by those trees. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but just my perspective, what we look at from East Bluff is well above the height of those trees.
So even red oaks at maturity probably won't be a big issue. They would be blotted out probably by the willows that are on Pennsylvania, so.
I just have a quick comment in reference to Parks and Rec. I think in the previous example, we kind of said the flowering of the fruits, bearing fruits of the trees are just hard headed trees. Where here, if it's an established walkway or even a bikeway, I think the fruit might matter in this case, especially with the incline.
That's a good point. And so maybe oaks aren't a good choice.
That's my thought, plus the maintenance on it, we're gonna have to blow it, in the fall to clear it, especially if there's bikes.
What if sugar maples then?
So it is someday going to be an existing walkway?
Well, that's the hopes. We're still getting, we need MDOT approval for the walkway / bike path underneath M119.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, we're pushing, hard to make that
Well, I think
happen.
it'd be great.
We really need that in a bad way because the bike trail just kind of drops off and people don't know how to get downtown.
I was coming in the building today and I was out looking
Yeah, I saw 'em.
at 3 trees at the top and their bicyclists went up and they said, is it closed? I said, yeah, and they went up a little bit and then they turned around and came back. So that would be a nice.
Tim, just one other thought is, I wonder if, let's say we do go with sugar maple or whatever we go, where we have that big pop of color there. What do you think about like that tree down at the bottom that's closest to the city hall building? What if we repeated that tree just so it pulls your eye through? So we aren't like changing trees every, 50 feet.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I was looking at historic photos before the walkway or spillway was built. It was a large, I think it was a maple at the corner there.
It was.
And it was a really nice visual anchor. So then I started thinking about, as you suggested, taking that last, river birch towards the building and replacing it with something that'll get some size and, make a statement down the road. Whether it's a large sugar maple or something else native that we can propose.
And then do we want to consider having like a little area that have an entrance or something?
Well, I think that's something we can consider later. I think what we want to do today is just
The
decide
trees, yes.
just decide on species of trees.
Yeah, at the very entrance of this, we were planning on putting a kiosk there that people are coming from outside of town on bike or walk of what's available downtown and everything.
Wayfinding?
Yeah, and there could be even some, some educational stuff also.
Well, I do think I've heard a consensus on
You want
the
this?
birch and the evergreen. How do people feel about the red maple?
It could be a red maple or it could be a sugar maple. Do you have a preference?
Sugar maples, would be lower on the browse list for something like, Asian longhorn beetle. We're really well represented with soft maples, and so I like the fall color, and I think is a design component. I actually have to take my hat off, there's probably much more competent designers in this room in this conversation. So, I like the sugar maples, they're a good solid tree, they fruit fairly infrequently, and the fruit is small. They are not as easy to find in the trades, but they are available. Actually, that's one thing I was searching right now, is that there are several different varieties that we could probably get from other places in the state.
I think that sounds good.
We have red maples available, so they can always be placed if that's the decision. I would say, I've always been intrigued with the idea of a birch grove, but that would take some significant maintenance, as with other things, but this would be.
I love the idea of birch grove. I think that'd be so pretty.
Sue, do you have any final comments?
No, other than, this is a little bit of an odd comment, but, my house has a birch grove around it and a river birch. So if anybody's curious about what that looks like and how that fares up here, my yard
It's
is
very
a good example of that.
We'll plant walk.
Yeah. You gonna serve cocktails on the porch too?
Oh, yeah. Happy.
Well, I think we did, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sue.
No.
Okay. I think we sort of have a consensus. Can you, again, have a motion proposed that we can recommend to city council?
Do you want me to? Okay, we'd like to make a motion then that the trees that will be used for this project will be white spruce, river birch, and sugar maple.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote?
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Ms. Mulder,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
and Ms. Stewart.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now, is this donor contributing all of the trees or just the evergreens?
This donor has voiced a dollar amount
Okay.
and has made some suggestions, but it didn't sound like it was the idea of donating to this project and being able to help this project move forward and landscaping cost was the biggest concern. And wanting to help the city, I don't think that the species selection was, the conversations were species that the donor was aware of and had experience with. It wasn't that they were adamant that that plant needed to be planted. But I would be happy to continue the conversation with Victor and the donor and see if that will work, and if not, then
Okay.
we'll continue the conversation.
Would it be helpful if Tim provided you rough cost? That's something that'd be pretty easy to do, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and Tim, do you have the donor's information?
Yeah, I've got his contact info.
Okay. So,
Oh, I can, in fact, that's something we have to do anyway for council for the site plan. I can, put an opinion cost together that basically itemizes everything in the plan.
Okay, I'll let you guys do that and we'll move on then to the next item.
And a related subject, does your donor happen to have a dog?
don't know. Actually, the conversation was away from the idea of having a dog park.
Oh, man.
The wrong place for that.
Okay, let's move on. I just put the item for the Relief Michigan grant update. I really don't have anything more to report. I've got an email out to them saying, if you need anything more from us, I'm still assuming we're gonna have something in the spring. But I know a lot of their plannings have been held up because of the COVID issue. So when I hear more, I will update them.
Did we discuss the donated tree plant location?
That's
Number two?
That's under F1. And F2, we're going to talk
I
about,
must be looking at a different agenda.
Okay, we'll go to new business. Again,
oh, you're looking at,
I'm looking at the previous one where we were all gonna drive. around.
yeah, that has to do with council.
What?
Yeah, the stuff you're probably looking at has to do with council. If you're looking at that little packet that I gave you. This is the
No,
one.
I thought part of what we were doing this week was to try and all of us scout and see where we think might be good locations. I thought that's what E2 was gonna be. Like as we get trees donated, where do we wanna deploy them?
And that's under F1, tree donation locations and species.
Okay, so we'll combine this. We do have one donation and we need to come up with a location for it, and then we can go on and talk about possible future locations for trees. That fit everything? Okay. So we're having a tree donated in memory of James Clark. Does anybody have a preferred site to plant this? I really like the idea of memorial trees being put in public places, so public parks or whatnot. That would be a preference of mine, but open to anybody's ideas.
I would think one of our parks would be a good place for it.
I was gonna suggest, I think we could start working on just some little clumps of trees for shade out here, because I have seen people sitting on the picnic tables in the shade. So this might be really nice. I don't know that we really want to start putting trees at Marine Park until we have a plan together. Ford Park, I don't think we're probably doing anything yet until we get the water issue addressed, right?
That's correct.
So if we want to keep it in town, Zorn and Shay both got new trees recently, maybe this would be a nice place to do it.
Sue, do you have any suggestions?
No, I was just trying to mentally go through the parks in the city, because I guess the ball field trees are all pretty new. I'm trying to think if there's any place up the hill that's a park in need of trees, and I'm not thinking of any place, so, yeah.
Well, I do think we need more trees in the public parks. I've seen more people move picnic tables underneath mature trees. And so I think that would be a good place for it. So I guess we could just.
Keep out the window here, yeah, almost.
But. And that is irrigated, that area there behind us.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's sprinkled.
The grass is green.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Give me a
then,
shovel, we'll figure it out.
yeah. Is there a consensus then to have this tree planted on the south side of City Hall here? And if so, we need to come up with a species. So,
Big park area, so we could think big. What about a tulip tree? Those are doing
I-
great at Shea Park.
And the tulip trees, again, big shade trees, they seem to be doing very well where we planted them. And I think in locations like that, you're looking for a large canopy.
I'd like to suggest too that maybe we start to look at doing just some more natural groupings rather than just going around the perimeter, if that's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, the perimeter that we had there was for a reason.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of the other trees we put in have been that way. We've tried to space them so that we have groupings.
Any criticism.
Oh, no,
It's like,
no,
I think
no,
just,
yeah. Oh.
Where did we get the tulip trees last time?
It was.
Kaufman,
So David got them from.
I think he ordered those trees, yeah.
They came up from downstate someplace. We got them from the nursery. I remember the guy say he drove up down near Kalamazoo, I believe.
Okay. I was gonna say that tulip trees are harder to find. I mean, we can't get them locally. I know that there's a couple of nurseries across the state that have a few. So just a thought, what's the drop dead date on this one? Is it even on ground?
Whenever you want. There's actually about 4 trees that were donated in the last probably 18 months.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because if Mr. Fennick wants to bring 25 trees to this area from a grower in southern Michigan, we have an opportunity to get things on a truck.
Mhm.
I would be willing for a memorial tree for the Clark family to provide the labor to get it in the ground, if that would
Very
help.
nice.
So, and I think I'm gonna be able to, I think there's a few tulip trees that are still available from the grower that we're trying to find folks from. Was there other thoughts?
Well, if we're gonna, I mean, this is the fall season. When would be the last optimal time to plant trees?
For the ground freezes.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
At this point, everyone's is photosynthesized for the season. There are some species that really don't do well if they're dug this time of year. And so most of the availability that I'm looking at right now is stuff that's been dug in the spring and has actually acclimated to being, in a container. I kind of want to tree. I know of one on Otis Lane that's quite large, probably 80 feet, and 20 inches in diameter. It's been there since, I think that was when I planted it, but there's very few. There's a couple I've seen on Walden Lake. I know they've done well. And
Great fall color, pretty flowers, so there is some litter to them. I guess that would just get chopped up with the mower.
It is that with a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any reason,
Not anything yet, I mean, we're still in the planning stages, but I think we could work it in, work around it.
is there? Okay.
Don't have anything specific right now.
Need to leave room for a tent for events that, like runs and stuff like that.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I mean, we've got, it
that's a
seems like
huge
we've got
area. Yeah.
lots of space to work it around and stuff like that. I mean, it's wide open. They would tolerate wetter conditions than, sugar maples would or some of the other species. And we have none in the inventory, so, or anything that, well,
We have some at Shea Park.
I was gonna say, we've added some small ones.
I think
So,
we've added 3 since I've been on board.
so we have less than 1/100% of our inventory.
Let's go for it. Let's take the jump.
Well, I was gonna say, the other thing that I would say too, to tree board is that, Liriodendron is a family that has, it is not a widespread or distributed family, so we don't have to worry about like an Asian this having a bug that feeds on it that shows up in the United States and kills 100% of our trees. It is very unlikely that it will get an invasive disease or insect.
Did they request this tree? Where did-
So I asked them if on a specific tree planted, they originally said they were just gonna leave it up to the city, then there ended up being 2 people involved and it got really involved and then finally Victor just told them that the tree board would decide for them. So typically the policy states that whoever wants to donate a tree, the tree board would decide what that species and the location of where that tree would go. The only exception that I know of is the tree right outside the window there. The retired police chief who just recently passed away, his wife wanted that specific in that specific location.
Well, I have another idea. Going back to the project, and what if that one maple that's right in front of the building is their tree?
Because you can get a good-sized tree for $500.
The funding for those other trees, is it coming from the city or is it coming?
Those fundings from all the other trees are in an account. I mean, we have yet to spend
Okay,
that
so
money.
We're using that account that we got from the settlement.
You are,
Okay.
yes.
I didn't know
So
whether
maybe
this
we
project came
should
under.
mix
No,
donations in.
yeah, so-
budget line.
So whether or not that's a separate account, I don't believe it is. I think all those funds are all together. Estate trees and the Beckett and Raider, case, going forward.
Okay. I have a little bit of empathy for Tim having to redo this drawing over and over again. Maybe as cool as that would be, if we put it someplace else, it might be a bit easier on Tim. Tim's been around this.
Please put it up there.
Okey-doke.
And I can also help with the location.
Mhm.
And, touch base with Lucas about what we have underneath as obstacles.
Yeah,
We
good
need,
point.
we need a motion then, another motion recommending to the city council.
I would like a motion that you guys already picked did you guys decide the south side of the city hall or up here?
Outside.
South side, and what species of trees? Is that
Tree.
Tulip tree.
the American tulip? Okay,
Liriodendron tulip.
yeah, I would like a motion.
As you just stated,
Okay, do I have a second? Miss Johnson, and I'm good with all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I,
Motion carries.
The other thing was on the agenda is, as I mentioned last week, or last meeting, that perhaps it'd be nice to have locations that are set aside for these memorial trees, so we don't have to discuss this all the time. And, again, that doesn't have to be decided today, but I just think if people have suggestions,
get some ideas.
then we should get something down on paper and we can finalize things later.
People want to donate trees, and we talk to those folks quite frequently, especially when they go in the paper. It seems like that generates phone calls for us. And then they want to know those locations, because because the policy states that the donor does not get to decide. So they do ask the decision, where are those trees? Where's the possibility? So that is important.
Sue, we'll start with you. Do you have any suggestions?
For changes to the list of approved trees?
No, I'm sorry. This is for locations of future gifts of trees.
No, I do not.
Okay. Cece?
No.
I do.
Okay.
What do you think about starting a fund for trees for Marina Park?
That's the direction I would hope we went.
For what park?
Marina Park, we have our first tree donated already. And then, John, I don't know when this would be appropriate, but do you think we could bring it up? Or maybe we need to have a plan first, I don't know. Chicken and egg thing, but this idea of, if the tree board could raise money, if, let's say we could get 20 trees donated, would the city match funds? So if we got $500 times 20, would the city match that?
I think it would be a lot more saleable as part of a plan than an arbitrary, if we get 20 trees, will you donate 20?
So let's start with the plan then.
Because you'll bring out
Yeah.
all the questions about who, why, where.
So we
Maybe
probably,
part of a plan that's saleable and it'll be a lot easier to sell.
do you think we could start a fund though towards a future plan, or best to just stay away until we?
Well, there's nothing to prevent someone from starting to raise money towards that goal. The minute you ask for matching funds and involve city, that's what the plan is.
I think that would be my first priority anyways, is Marina Park.
Well, if you start raising money, then you can come in and say, we have so many dollars and we're working on a plan. It's like, oh, you got skin in the game, well, we should support that to increase the canopy in the city.
Yep.
That makes sense to me.
I also know the Marina Park is, there's a lot of things that have to happen before anything can be done there. I mean, I think we all know about that. So, and I don't know where all that's gonna go, but there's gonna be a lot of people weighing in on that before anything happens.
You think we're
So,
gonna have this money sitting in a fund for too long, is what you're trying to say?
no, if you, like Mr. Leo said, if you wanna start a fund, that's awesome. But Marina Park, I mean, there's so many decisions that have to be made there. And there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna want to weigh in on that, especially the Harbor Commission, you have the Harbor Master, City Manager,
Understood.
Planning Commission, and all the above.
Yep, this would be seed money.
But
So-
having the money there would actually be another catalyst to force some action to be taken on that part, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I sort of look at that as a separate project.
I would agree.
A separate project and that may take place. I'm looking particularly, or I was thinking particularly trees are gonna be donated now or in
They don't wanna
maybe
wait
3
a
years
year and a
before
half,
this
yeah.
comes.
In other areas.
And again, I'd like to see another tree in Josephine Ford Park for picnic goers. There's,
I think we're a little afraid to put trees in because. of
I
the
know it's
water
very
table.
wet there. There was a big maple that was taken down at Zorn Park just recently, which we could put a tree in. Between the cannon, or just where the cannon is, there's a room for about 3 more on the north side of the sidewalk in the cannon. We've removed a couple of dead trees from there.
You know, say that make it.
Yeah, so I guess those would be my first priorities.
When I was driving around, I was kind of looking at the city from the standpoint of where are trees underrepresented. But the other ones I came up with is, so like, cities have like streetscape plans, like where you would give emphasis to your major corridors, like ours would be Main Street. And State Road's a problem because you've got the utility wires on both sides. Lake Street, for example. So Lake, a lot of it is tree. I think that whole area, the South Lake and IGA and all that, I think that could be really, look a lot nicer, and I think trees would be a good start. So that would be, I think, a great place. So it would be in the right of way. So I don't know if somebody wants their memorial tree to go there, but I mean,
Well,
I
I
might
was-
have some tree donations that wouldn't
I was
have.
sort of hoping with the Relief Michigan grant that the 25 trees we have there, we could perhaps put elsewhere in the city to give some representation.
Yeah, those would be small trees, right?
Well,
If I could just make a quick point, what would be very helpful is that when people walk through the door, and they're always referred to me, is if you had a map, and especially give them a choice, like, hey, here are the designated locations, like Mr. Gilbert said in front of the cannon. Like, here are 3 points in front of the cannon. Where would you like that to go? Especially if they're going to be donating money, that would be very helpful for me and helpful for you guys to get more funds coming in.
That's a good idea.
But that's a thought. Maybe I could sit down with Mr. Gilbert or anybody and say, here are the maps for these certain parks. Here are the designated locations that the tree board had picked. Pick your spot.
I'd be glad to do that, Andy. I'm sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, my comment on that, we've kind of been over this before, where if you tell people that they can plant a memorial tree and they pick the place, it kind of becomes their tree instead of part of the city forest. And then anytime you want to do anything to the tree, it's an issue for them. So we try not to let people personalize trees when they donate trees.
She's
And
right.
that would be my concern, is that then people would say, oh, well, but that one is for so-and-so. And then they want a plaque on it, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and that is true.
Can I add to that though, too?
Certainly.
Having done this and seen this in other associations and cities, the other thing that happens too is we are memorializing people with living things. And if the tree dies, then there's also a second feeling of loss. And this has been, well documented from large associations like the National Society of Arboriculture. If they're donating to the city forest, we maintain the city forest, they have something that's ongoing.
And actually, we've had some memorial trees that were planted, I know one in Shea Park was a memorial tree that we had to remove this spring, so that's a very good point. Taken, so. Well, I guess then, just sort of generally speaking, any gifts we have between now and the Marina project will sort of fill up the spaces within the Zorn Park, and then we'll move on to other locations.
Hold
Okay,
that tree, Sandy.
very good.
Again, we've gone quite long today, so Dan's put together a tree selection for city trees. We had two separate lists, which was kind of confusing. And I asked her last meeting if she might combine lists between small and medium and large trees so that when we come into a situation where there's power lines or open spaces, we can pick one that's on the list. I guess what I'd like to do with this is not approve it today, but Ben, if we could have some input from you. Susan, I don't think you probably have a copy of this.
I can send it,
I don't.
I can send it electronically, or Andy can.
Okay, we'll have one sent to you.
Great.
But we'll look at this and again, discuss it next week.
Just two other things to be thinking about too is a better title for this, and whether we would want this to be a possible handout for city residents, need some help with, gosh, I need a tree, I don't know what kind to put in. And then I had just started roughing out, so I think the one-page thing is good, but then I don't know if we do want this to be a handout, if we do want this appendix. If you scroll down a little bit more, Andy.
Right here or further?
Oh, you have an earlier version maybe? Oh, there it is, yep. Where we could have some popular varieties of each of these, just so people can have a visual and here's the pros and cons kind of thing.
Okay.
So for next meeting.
Yes, well, Dan, thank you very much for doing that. And again, I agree, it'd be great to have it out to the public. I think I gave you this one from Bayview that lists trees that people want to plant. They have a list that people choose from. And I think that's a really good idea. And it helps us hopefully speed up the meetings in the
Yeah,
future.
and I'm sorry, could I have just one more
Yeah.
little new business thing? I was wondering whether we might want to start some type of promotion, and talk about it more in the future, about maybe we're once or twice a year, maybe in the spring and fall, maybe in the spring with Arbor Day and in the fall with the first day of fall or something like that, to see if we can get local landscapers involved in doing a plant a tree promotion where we don't pay for it, but we will help with species selection, and we'll hook you up with a landscaper, and the landscaper will give you a discount. That'd be a great way to contribute to the forest without us having to pay for it.
I think it's a good idea. We can take it up
Yep.
at another time. Again, it's the more awareness we get
Yeah, make
out
it
in the
easy for,
public, it
yeah,
makes
make
it
it
easier
easy
for
for
them
people, yeah.
to do, so.
And one other thought is, what about people that want a tree in the city? How do we handle that right now? They just do it, or they come to us to do it?
No, they have application, and then follow this big thing and all that kind of thing, so. But, okay, any other new items, new business? Okay, final comments, Cece? Susan?
Nothing to add, thanks.
Okay, Dana?
We're the only one on YouTube, so.
Okay.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.